Thanks for joining me. I'm Aaron Rutten, and in this video, I'm going to show off some of the custom brushes I created for Photoshop. I've created 10 new brushes for Photoshop, which will be available on February 1st. I'll demonstrate the 10 brushes and 8 bonus brushes that are available right now. I'm going to start by demonstrating the brushes that are already available. The first is in the painterly category. It's called Bristle Dabs. I'll go ahead and pick a color like this blue here. If I use light pressure, I get kind of a thin, sparse texture. If I press down hard, then I get something that's more opaque and clumpy. But I could get a really nice rock or stone texture. I could use this to paint snow on mountains and all kinds of stuff. Beneath that is Cloudy Brush. We'll go ahead and use that on a sky-colored background. And I can make these really nice cloudy shapes with this brush. I can press down hard to get a nice opaque stroke, or I can press down lightly to get something that's more transparent. But I could quickly and easily use this brush to create nice cloudy shapes. And of course, you could make your brush smaller, and you can make smaller clouds as well. The next brush is called Fan Pines Down. These are pine trees with branches that point downward. So I'm going to select kind of a pine tree color like this. I can use light pressure to make smaller trees that are more faint in the background. And if I use heavier pressure, those trees will start to get bigger and more opaque. Even heavier pressure, and they're more opaque and even bigger. So I can create a nice forest very easily like that. The next brush is called Heavy Paint. I'm going to go ahead and select a dark brown color like this. And I can get this really nice, heavy, rough paint texture. It kind of looks like the paint is peeling off of something. Choose a lighter brown, and I can build this up and get a really nice dirt or stone texture. The next brush is called Impressionist Leaves. I'm going to use this with a nice green leafy color. And I can get these really nice leaf dabs like you might see in an Impressionist painting. If I use lighter pressure, then I'll get smaller leaves that are a bit more faint. If I use heavier pressure, then I get bigger, bolder leaves. I can make my color a bit brighter, shift it more towards yellow, and then I can put in some highlights on top of these leaves. Go even more toward yellow. Put in a few more like this. The next brush is called Rough Dabs. I'm going to select a brighter purplish pink color like this. And you can see that this brush has a little bit of color variability, so the color you get isn't static, it has some life to it. If I select a greenish color like this, you can see it has some variety of greens and blue-greens. If I use lighter pressure, I get smaller dabs. If I use heavier pressure, then I get bigger dabs. Now you don't have to use it for abstract art, you could also use it for textures on mountains or something. Or maybe you'd want to use it for something like bark on a tree. I'm going to skip on down to the watercolor category, and we have short wet strokes. Choose a bluish color here, and this is a watercolor brush that gives you nice watercolor effects. If you press lightly, you get more of a broken up texture. If you press harder, then the paint is more thick and opaque. So if you were painting something like watercolor leaves, this might work really well for that. Pick a nice bright green and put it on top of that. That gives you a nice effect. Beneath that, we have watercolor splatter. And as the name implies, you can create nice watercolor splatters. If you're using a small brush, then those splatters are smaller. If you use a bigger brush, then those splatters will be larger. And of course, I can mix in other colors as well into that. So that's it for the 8 bonus brushes that you can download right now. But what about the 10 new brushes that are going to be available on February 1st? Let's take a look at those. This is sort of a digital art essentials kit. So we'll start up here in the top in airbrushes. This is a digital airbrush. I could use this with a darker color to do some nice shading on this spherical shape here. I'm just using a really big airbrush, and I'm going to quickly just put in a shadow and highlight on it. Reflect a little bit of the environment color here. This airbrush also works really well for painting nice big gradients in the background. Beneath that, we have grainy airbrush. This airbrush has a grainier texture to it. You'll see what I mean when we paint with it here. If you look closely, you may be able to see that it has some grainy texture to it. I'll go ahead and zoom in and you might be able to see that better. Moving on from the airbrushes, we have the blenders. This is soft diffuse. I can use this to paint right along the edge here and diffuse the edge and kind of break it up. It works very well to blend paint and pencil and ink. You can control the strength if you want it to be a little bit more heavy. For example, I could set it to 80. Now it's really going to blend it up. Beneath that, we have Wet Oily Blender. This is a blender that gives us a wetter look. Looks kind of like if you use turpentine or something to thin out oil paint. You can kind of pull out little streaks and smudge it around like so. Moving on from the blenders, we have ink brushes. This is inking pen. And this is just your basic pen that you would use for inking. It has a nice smooth edge. So you could use it for comic books or manga or any kind of ink illustration. Now, if you don't have a very steady hand or you want really, really smooth lines, then you can choose smooth pen. And this has quite a bit of smoothing added to it to really smooth out the line. And it gives you lines that are a bit more stable. And if you don't like that perfect smooth look of the line, then I have rough ink. And rough ink just gives you a more rough, natural edge, as if you're using real ink on paper that has a bit of texture. Now, we already looked at all the painterly categories, so let's skip on down to pencils. We have hard pencil. Choose kind of a dark gray color here. And hard pencil is a pencil that has a nice hard edge to it. You can also tilt this pencil if your pen supports pen tilt. And you can shade with the side of the pencil to get a broader mark than you'd get if you're using your pencil more upright. You can also control the opacity by using pen pressure, so you can get varying degrees of shading. Beneath that, we have soft pencil. And soft pencil is quite a bit softer. It also supports pen tilt, so you can tilt your pen to change the size of the mark. You can also control opacity with pen pressure. And then beneath that, we have grainy pencil. If you use light pressure, you'll get a more transparent mark, and if you use heavier pressure, you'll get a more opaque mark. You can get everything in between. And just like with the previous pencils, you can tilt your pen if your pen supports pen tilt to change the angle of the mark. So those are the 10 new brushes that'll be available on February 1st, plus the 8 bonus brushes that are already available now. As I mentioned earlier, if you maintain your membership, then you'll be able to download new brushes each and every month. Download my custom brushes and other resources for digital art at aaronrutten.link/PhotoshopVIP. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.